everyone, it's Allison from Fathom 5 Tarot, and I'm here to record another installment in my series, What I Have Learned From, and then insert tarot deck. So the deck that I'm going to talk about this week is the Animal Totem Tarot by Lisa Robertson, who wrote the book, and had the concepts behind the card, art by Eugene Smith. Now this is a deck that I don't have the box for. It's an old Llewellyn deck that came with the crappy Build-A-Bear box. You were supposed to fold together and put together, so I immediately just threw that in the garbage. This is before I learned that you probably shouldn't throw the tarot boxes in the garbage if you want to get rid of them, but whatever. I've kept this one. And it was also at a weird time where Llewellyn decided for like a week and a half that they were going to change up their cardstock to be thicker. This isn't even the whole deck, but I hate it. It feels like cardboard. I don't know. It's never as bad when I actually get it in my hands, but it actually prevents me sometimes from wanting to really work with it. It's hard to shuffle, and it doesn't really have too much of a bow, but it's getting a bit of a bow, and whatever. I'm always on the lookout for a used copy that I can pick up with the better, thinner Llewellyn cardstock that shuffles so nicely. But I haven't found one. And I think that's good because it means people are hanging on to their Animal Totem Tarots. That's the back. It's not technically reversible because the center line of animals, they're all different. But if you're going to learn all those animals, then more power to you. For my purposes, it's totally reversible. And it's a really easily accessible deck through Amazon, Book Depository, anything like that. And I really wanted to consciously start this series with decks that were easy to get your hands on. I will move on to some indie decks. I have a lot of indie decks that I really, really like. But for now, mass market. And of course, if this is your first time tuning into this series, the goal behind it is to take a look at some decks and some unique offerings that they have, and then apply that knowledge to existing decks that you already have. Pick them up if you want, but this is not about consumption. This is about learning. So with that in mind, what I've done is what I've done with the last two videos. I've chosen some majors and some representative minors from each of the four suits, and I just want to talk about what I've learned. Now, I will say that I actually had a lot of trouble choosing cards. I had like half the deck in my pile last night because they're really cool and beautiful. And I learned as much about animals by reading the excellent guidebook by Lisa Robertson as I did about tarot. So it was really hard for me last night to actually distinguish. So I've really tried to limit it to my interpretation of the tarot card and not just fun facts about animals, which I could talk about all day long. But there might be some of that too. So the first card that I selected is her interpretation of the Magician. I really love this interpretation. You can see the infinity swirl in the snow above the fox. Foxes are native to where I live. I actually just saw one last night. Oh, it was awesome. It was so cute. But what I really like about this interpretation, and I think this is true of many magician cards, but this one makes it really clear that while the representatives of the suits are there as magical tools, what the fox is using is its innate instinct, right? So it's able to hear little rodents under the snow and then pounce down from above and get them and feed himself. This isn't something that he needed to turn to a magical tool for necessarily, or another person. And that's an interpretation of the Magician that I really, really like. At some point in the next month, I really want to do a video specifically about the Magician card and about the inherent problems that can come with leaning too heavily on another person to find that within yourself. It's coming. And I think I'll pull a bunch of Magician cards to talk about them, and I think this would definitely be one. If you're looking for this deck, this is the image on the box, and I think it's just such a beauty. But he's using that innate understanding of a greater world, right? This is a world that human beings, like, we can't sense the rodents under the snow. It's something much deeper than that, but he can. He's got that ability. So I really like that. I also chose the Chariot card. So here we have Orca, which are not native to where I live in Ontario. I did once go on a whale watching expedition, and while we saw tons of whales, we didn't see actually any orca. But I really like this version of the Chariot card because while it looks structurally like a chariot, right, two animals in front of one, they're not pulling. This is a team effort. Orca hunt in packs, and they are able to communicate through these super sophisticated ways in order to catch their prey. And they move swiftly and all of those things that we associate with the Chariot. But the Chariot doesn't have to be a lone venture, I think is what I really like about this card. And it doesn't have to be, there's all kinds of feelings I have being a horse person who used to ride horses all the time. And has sort of stopped that because I'm just not ethically sure how I feel about it anymore in the way that I can do it. If I could have my own horse and build that relationship, that would be something. But just going for a lesson every week on a horse that has been ridden a bunch of times by a bunch of different people that day, and I don't know. And the Chariot's very much about somebody driving the chariot, the horse is pulling them in one direction, controlling something else. Whereas this is a real coming together. So just to remember in the Chariot card that maybe part of your chariot is part of a team, and it can be a team effort. It doesn't always have to be a solo effort. So I think that's super, super cool. I don't know that I actually learned anything new from the Death card here. But while it's a very difficult card for me to look at, and it's funny actually, I just pulled from a different deck this week another Death card that really has like blood and guts and viscera on it, also an animal interpretation. I'm really appreciative of this Death card because from death comes life. There is a cycle there that's inevitability and part of it. And while it can be disturbing and difficult to look at, for our buddy here, I don't know that it's a vulture specifically now. I'd have to look at the guidebook. She's very specific about what animal is what. And I think vulture is actually a bit too generic for what this is. I'd have to look it up. But that's life for him and sustenance. And then like he's performing such a valuable function. This card also speaks to me really personally because I have a friend who she worked for the World Wildlife Fund, and her special project was to protect vultures in Nepal, and these are like the ugliest birds, and set up a sanctuary for them. And her position was that, you know, everyone's focused on the pandas. Everybody loves the pandas, but these ugly creatures are so vital to the ecosystem and nobody looks out for them. And that was her great life's work. As a matter of fact, she tragically passed away in trying to make that happen. And it has happened, in the sanctuaries there, and it's amazing. So this has a really strong resonance for me, and I have a special appreciation for that card because of that. So while I don't really like looking at animal blood and guts, I think it's a worthwhile exercise in a deck like this. Oh, I should also say, if this wasn't clear, although this is an animal deck, this is not a cute deck. There are cute images in it, but it deals with hard and difficult and sad things, and it's not just like unicorns and rainbows, and not like that at all. So know that if that attracts you, great. If that repels you, maybe this isn't the deck for you. Temperance. I love this. The flamingo is such a duality, right? It's on the one hand so graceful and gorgeous, and on the other hand quite ridiculous with its bright pink color and its funny build, and like it looks sort of like like a yard sale of animal parts, and God was like, all right, put this thing together. You know, the rainbow, the water, 1 foot in the water, 1 foot out of the water. I just thought it was such a great image for temperance. But also what I learned from the guidebook is that you can judge the health of a flamingo by its color. The deeper pink, then that's a healthy flamingo. If it's pale pink, then it probably hasn't achieved the correct diet balance in order to have all of its functions working at optimal levels. And I didn't know that about them, that there's a real balancing act in what a flamingo needs, and they have very, very specific needs in order to make that balance for them to be healthy. So I thought that was a great representation of the Temperance card. And just, again, balance, balance, balance. Was that it for my majors? I guess it was. I thought I had one more. Oh, well. Maybe they're out of order. We'll see. I don't know. Okay, so the aces in this deck are great. I did just choose, I think, oh no, I've got 2 aces in here. But I love this Ace of Wands. And so it's a firefly on the wand, and you can see in the sky there are other fireflies buzzing around. Fireflies are indigenous to where I live, and I just think it's such a great metaphor because they're beautiful and everybody loves them. Like, all my life, if I see a firefly, I'm with someone who sees them, they're like, oh, like, and it's not unusual, but they're just so cool and so pretty. But during the day, they just look like an ordinary bug. They're sort of unrecognizable. And they light up at night because they're looking for love. And I think it's a really great reminder for the Ace of Wands that even if you have this creative spark, this passionate spark, it's not going to be consistent, and it's not going to be going all the time, right? You have to wait for your nightfall. You have to wait for your moment. I can get quite frustrated with myself. I feel like I have a lot of creative energy, and if I'm not doing that thing in that moment, then I can get kind of down on myself a little bit. And I think that this interpretation is a really great reminder to just know that your moment is coming. And then strike when the iron's hot. When that moment happens, then go for it. But you can't be at an Ace of Wands energy all the time. It's totally unsustainable. It's completely unrealistic. So what a great card. 5 of Wands. Honey Badger don't care. It's a honey badger. I don't know. Is that meme too old now to have any resonance? I don't know. Maybe it is. But I love it so much. You know what? I'll link it below if you haven't seen the honey badger nature video. Just know that you have to enjoy naughty words if you watch that video. I do, so that's fun. But it's such a great representation for the 5 of Wands, because the 5 of Wands does depict conflict, and it does depict a battle, but it's not the worst battle in the deck. Like, it's not the biggest obstacle that you'll have to overcome. And he's just standing his ground, right? Like, they are like vicious and sort of scary creatures. And I love that there's like a well in the background, right? He is like, I see this in a couple of different ways, like protecting this sort of life source, standing his ground in front of it, but also the idea of like a wishing well, that maybe this is, again, creative fire, creative passion. And what we have here is a difference of thoughts about what direction to take that particular passion. Could be at your work, could be in a creative team that you're working on. But it's a great stand your ground card in a way that I think deviates a bit from the Rider-Waite-Smith, where it's just a bunch of people in a clump. And you just know that these wands are going to back down because he's Honey Badger. He don't care. Watch it if you haven't seen it. I'll link it below. It's so good. The 10 of Wands. I think this is really cool because the traditional burden in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck becomes an obstacle or part of the journey itself, right? That these burdens we have to carry are often what make the journey rewarding. Nothing easy comes without some kind of fight. I've quoted that song like, or nothing worth having. That's what it is. Nothing worth having comes without some kind of fight. I've quoted that song like 5 times in the last 2 weeks. I feel like Lovers in a Dangerous Time. But I think it's so cool because what I learned from the guidebook, which I actually must have known subliminally, but I never really put together, is that snails only move when the conditions are right. Otherwise, they just like they shell up and they don't come out. So they, if it's raining, if there's any sort of environmental disturbance, they won't go. And you can see there is rain in the background, but not where we are in the foreground. So he's picked his moment. And he's just like making progress, and maybe it's slow and maybe it's an obstacle, but it's part of the journey. And that you should embrace that. That's something valuable, that by the time you get to the end, these wands that you carried will be a badge of honor of the creative process that you went to, right? It's the difficulties make it richer in the end. I think that's such a cool interpretation. Ace of Swords. At first, when I got this deck, this is one I really had to go to the guidebook for, because I was like, I don't get it really. Like, is the panda particularly intellectual animal? The air doesn't really seem to, but now that I've read the guidebook, I was just like, oh yeah. So the panda this is metaphorical, right? And it has to do with the fact that it's eating bamboo, and the panda lives on bamboo, but needs to ingest an incredible amount before it can really expend energy, and spends a ton of its day eating. And as Lisa Robertson explains in the book, her thought behind this card was like, the Ace of Swords is intellectual knowledge, but you need to take it in before you can move on to the next thing, before you can move on to the Two of Swords and be conflicted. You need to look at the world around you and take in all of the information. And I think, man, in 2020, that's so valuable. You have to look so critically at information that you're getting, and then make really good informed decisions. And, by going to experts and, checking your sources for reliability. But also just the amount of information, I think, is really, really good. You can't go through the swords unless you've taken something on first. And I thought that was really, really cool. In a way, I hadn't seen the Ace of Swords before. I got a hair in my mouth. Okay, so here's a good example of this not being necessarily a cutesy deck. And this is, the Three of Swords. And I really like this interpretation, because I do think it really delineates the difference between heartbreak, which I often think of with the Three of Swords, some kind of emotional pain, but then grief, which is related but not the same thing. And what we know about elephants is that they do have basically death rituals, and they grieve their dead. This has been observed in the species. It's wild. And I love this, that we've moved beyond the heart, the swords through the heart, so much so that the elephant is decomposed. And that's what they will do, is that they will carry the bones of their dead. God, elephants are so amazing. And that there's also this long grief process, and that you don't know necessarily what that's going to look like if you are moving through it. If you've been through a major grief process in your life, as all of us have, what you've probably learned is that it's completely unpredictable. It's things you think we'll find difficult are actually manageable, and then the things that should be easy seem impossible in the moment. So just, it really expanded the Three of Swords card by looking at this and thinking about the fact of grief being linked to that card, and knowing that that's a valuable part of the process, but it's not the same thing as heartbreak. So gosh, I love that so much. And again, that's tough. Not just a cute deck. The Nine of Swords here. This is one of a few cards in the deck. There's a few others. Maybe I'll see how I'm doing for time at the end. I might pull a few others, because I think this is really interesting in that this is one of a few where we have what I would say is the hint of a human, right? And I was like, why am I calling it the hint of a human? And I realized, so I once read this article about Playboy magazine and the centerfolds, not the models who pose in the centerfolds, but the actual centerfold picture, and that Hugh Hefner had always demanded that in each centerfold there be, or in probably each picture, I don't know for sure, but certainly in the centerfolds, there be a hint of a man. So it couldn't just be the woman, right? There had to be a smoldering cigar in an ashtray, or a glass of whiskey half drunk or something, to show that it's not enough on her. Anyway, oh my God, I could talk about that for days. Anyway, back to the tarot. The hint of a human. And there are a few hints of human interaction with the world. And so this is a whippoorwill outside of a window. they're quite noisy birds. And so this idea that there's something keeping you awake and sort of keeping you occupied, but they're outside of where you are. And this is like a safe little bird. It can't hurt you. And actually quite cute. And in some circumstances, the song could be enjoyable, but not in this context. And so are you bringing it in with you? Is it too much? Are you reacting too much to what is actually keeping you awake? So I just thought that was a great interpretation there. Okay, cups. Oops, out of order here. And so I just chose 2 cups. That's funny. I don't know. I probably culled it down because I had like half the deck in here last night because I like some of the cards so much. Again, there's great walkthroughs of this deck on here. So if you want to see more cards, you absolutely can. So the 7 of Cups. So very traditional in that there are different things in each of the cups, although it's set up like a picnic here. You can see like napkins and food and breadsticks and cutlery. But I thought the idea of dragonflies is so good. In the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, there's one person sort of considering all these different cups. But what I like about dragonflies and what I recognize in myself in this card is that when you have all these opportunities, maybe you just flit from one to the other without really stabilizing in one or making a choice. If you have trouble making decisions, like these little dudes just like boing, 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 boing from cup to cup to cup. And I just thought it was a neat interpretation as either an opportunity, like take a look at everything that's around you, or a bit of a warning, like choose your cup already. So what a great card. Okay, so let's talk about this 8 of Cups. I mean, it's so good. So the 8 of Cups is represented by a salmon spawning upstream. And I love everything about this interpretation. So salmon do swim upstream so that they can spawn and mate. But it's so hard. Like if you've ever watched a video of salmon spawning, it's just so much effort. And you're like, dude, just go downstream. So there's a current. You could do it. But they are driven. And while in the 8 of Cups, certainly there's a character moving away from stacked cups and something that has taken some time to build. What I love about this is that this is a pull away, right? So it's not just walking away from something, but like being drawn away to something else and something that is necessary and better. Sort of by the light of the full moon, this cycle has come to an end and it is time for you to move on. And there is something at the other end. It's not an unknown, it's a destination that you're going to. And I think that this card makes it beautiful. Also, if you look on the side, there are bear tracks on the side, which is really interesting because the bear is obviously hunting the salmon as well. But this is also all part of life, right? There's going to be risk when you move away from your beautifully stacked cups that you have spent time making a foundation. But that's also just life, right? That inherent risk is what's going to make that journey valuable. And then if you want to extend the metaphor even further, this is, again, just something that I happen to have in my personal knowledge bank. But I did this ecology study years ago, just as like a fun participant. I'm not a scientist. Where we examined plants by the side. I was out in British Columbia and we examined plant life along rivers. And the healthiest plant life was where there were bear tracks. And the reason is like they would catch the salmon and then they would eat the salmon and then bones and skin and scraps would fall into the ground, which would fertilize the soil, which would mean the plants would grow better and which would make it better habitat for the salmon. Like I just love the cyclical nature and how nature just knows so much better than we do. And we should stop meddling. It's such a great 8 of Cups. I love it. 4 of Pentacles, little squirrel, very indigenous to where I am. Saying there's a tree outside my window and there's often a squirrel there. He's not right there right now, but what I really also like about this, if you do, I don't have the guidebook with me, but if you do buy this is the cover of the guidebook. And so he is saving for winter, smart. But also there's like one of his pentacles has been broken by new growth. And again, it's that great duality of like, this is a good idea in moderation, but if you're holding everything to you, things that you could give away to other people to make their lives better, like eventually, like how much money can you have? How many things can you have before they start to rot and break down, and you won't enjoy it because you've just hoarded it and someone else could have really used it. I just love the duality of that. Rather than just showing the character hoarding, we have the consequence, right? That now that pentacle is of use to no one. And what was the point, really? So I love that. And then I chose the Pentacle Courts because I think they're great. So Queen of Pentacles, Piggy. Pigs are so misunderstood. They're so lovely. I had a chance when I worked at a horse ranch. We also had farm animals, and so I looked after pigs, and they're like smart and funny and like dogs and sweet and affectionate, and I love this Queen of Pentacles because she's so enjoying this like sensual experience, you know, that is actually very beneficial, right? Pigs need to have wallows because it coats their skin and it prevents them from getting sunburned and it cools them down. But also it really makes me think about this idea of self-care, which I'm 100% on board with, 100%. But this is like simple self-care, right? This doesn't require a monthly subscription or like you don't have to go and buy a bunch of like Gwyneth Paltrow endorsed nonsense. Like, sorry if anybody's a fan of Goop. I am not. Like just there are things that you can do for self-care that are so within your reach, and like the simplest thing that brings that earthy pentacle energy joy, that sensual joy, do that. And I feel like, especially in the pandemic time, and it's totally understandable, but this idea of self-care has become a little bit like keeping up with the Joneses. Like, what are you doing for? And I just, it makes me a little uncomfortable, if for no other reason than the money spent on it. So great. And then the King. I should say there's a crown for all of our courts. These are just the pentacle courts, but you can see it's on the pentacle for the sow, and then it's on the bison's horn. And could there be a better symbol for the King of Pentacles, the King of Earth, than the bison, right? Who is like just this great symbol of like persevering despite human interference, and almost made extinct in the settling of the West, but then came back and is just this like majestic, strong, earthy, foundational creature that was in the Americas before people were, and still persists on this constant. I think it's the perfect symbol for that stability, that feeling of being rooted in the earth. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm almost at 30 minutes. I don't think I'll show the other Hint of Human cards. There are a few others. Now I'm not going to be able to remember. Judgment is sort of a Christmas one, actually, like a sleigh with reindeer and gifts. And then there is one other. Oh, Strength is an oxen pulling human supplies. And that's an interesting one. Maybe I'll talk about it another day if I'm talking about Strengths cards. But this is a great deck, and if you've been thinking about an animal deck, there are some beautiful indie animal decks, I know, and I'm going to get to them on this series. But this one's very accessible. It's definitely great if you are thinking about animal energies, and the guidebook is just second to none, both in terms of the tarot world and in terms of the animal world. So that's the Animal Totem Tarot. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a very happy holiday, and I'll see you in the new year with some more. Bye.